As sentient beings, we find ourselves thrown into a world that inflicts immense pain and suffering. So having the option of a graceful exit should be seen as a basic, universal human right. Since our existence is better to never have been, we should all have the right to die. Welcome to The Right to No Longer Exist, a Right to Die podcast. In this show, we attempt to change the perception of society's views of voluntary euthanasia and what true autonomy could look like.
Hey everybody, how are you doing? I'm here with Ashley, and she's joining me as a co-host once again. How are you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing great.
Nice. We are joined with a special guest, Melanie from Australia, and
Lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm really excited to get into this conversation. There's some topics that sound really interesting to get into, and also love to just hear about yourself and your story and how you became interested in the Right to Die movement and all of that. So yeah, however you'd like to share how you got started with all this, feel free.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm Melanie. I'm 42 years young, as I like to say, rather than old. I'm from Tassie, which is an island state southeast of Australia. So I'm all the way on the other side of the pond. So in terms of my work background, I'm a former primary school teacher. I've also taught some ESL, which is English as a second language, and I've also volunteered teaching children from rural disadvantaged regions in China online through the organisation Stepping Stones. So my education, my background basically sort of lies in the realm of education. And as far as my education goes, I have a master's degree in teaching, and I also have a bachelor's degree majoring in sociology and history. And alongside my teaching interests, I'm also a botanic artist. I love to embrace my creative side, and I'm also in the process of writing a manuscript. And that's about my mental health journey with a particular focus on the harms of diagnosis. So pretty busy with a few different projects at the moment. But so just to give you a bit more of a background of my personal story, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 15, and I was put on medication for this. And I have to truthfully say that it's been the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Not just the fact of being put on the toxic psychotropic substances itself, but also having been assigned, in my view, a very ugly label that's followed me like a dark shadow for most of my life. I think it's safe to say it's caused me continual psychological torment. Having been branded as a person who, in inverted commas, is disordered. And it's just left me feeling like a broken, almost subhuman person. And it's only until recently that I've decided to divorce myself from this label, because it's caused me nothing but pain. And like I've said, it's the main feature of my memoir, that being the harm of diagnosis, and how for some people, not for everyone, but for some people, like myself, it can destroy their lives. And also in the manuscript that I'm writing, I also plan to write a bit about the Right to Die movement, because my interest in the movement has stemmed from my own mental health struggles. And due to my chronic mental health issues, it actually got to the point where I considered wanting to take my own life through one of the Right to Die organisations. And I hope that sometime in the future, should I need to enlist their services, I'll be able to do so without too much difficulty in terms of time, red tape, that sort of thing. So, I mean, as morbid as it may sound in some ways, I really do sincerely hope that, that option potentially could be out there, not just for me, but for other people, of a similar, going through a similar sort of, situation, that, we could all have that option there for us as a bit of a safety net. Yeah. But anyway, I first started off looking at this as a possible option back in 2018, which was one of the worst years of my life. It was the year my granddad passed away, who I idolized. He was everything to me. It was also the year when I severed my engagement to my then partner of 7 years. It was also the year where I decided to leave my teaching profession as a primary school teacher. So basically everything was just like going downhill for me. It was just a really crap situation. And as a way to cope, I turned to the internet and looked up articles about mental health that I hope would have helped me. But the ones that I found, I just didn't find them to be that relatable to how I was actually feeling. So I then did a bit more further research and came across the term right to die and became quite curious and wanted to know more about it. I soon discovered several right to die organisations and found that they offered then that I realised that they offered, certain particular services in terms of, the possibility of someone being able to sort of end their own life. And, that kind of like piqued my interest because, I did want to help, but I just wanted a certain kind of help. I didn't want the typical conventional help in terms of, therapists and meds and all these suicide preventionist kind of, things coming at me. The kind of help I wanted was a specific kind, and that was, hopefully, making an exit through one of the right to die organizations. Yeah. So anyway, but, alongside with that, another coping strategy for me has been turning to the world of philosophy and science. And I know that's something, Kevin, I think you've mentioned in some of your recent podcasts, how you also have turned to philosophy, as a way to cope. Is that right?
Yeah, I've definitely went down that rabbit hole for sure. And I still like it. I love it. I'm not a good advocate as far as the face of it, because I don't say all the fancy words of it, right? But I understand all of it when I'm watching.
Yeah, I think it's just comforting. I find it really comforting. And what about you, Ashley? Does philosophy have any interest for you at all?
It does a little bit. Some of it's kind of hard for me to understand, but
yeah.
Kevin has actually taught me a lot about certain philosophies, and sometimes we have discussions and we talk about antinatalism and ephilism and things like that. And he's actually the one who's educated me a lot on that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm also interested in antinatalism as well, and I've actually listened to a few of Amanda's podcasts on, is it what's her podcast called again?
Exploring antinatalism.
That's right. Yeah, and I think she's also, as well as you, Kevin, an awesome presenter, and I find her quite entertaining. And I know I think they've actually made something like about 78 podcasts or something at this point, and I've only listened to a handful of them. But the ones I have listened to, I really enjoyed, and I look forward to exploring that podcast even more, as well as yours too. So yeah. But getting back onto the whole philosophy thing, I have to say I'm a big fan of David Benatar. I love his confidence in how he presents his arguments. I think he's a great writer. I think he's a great, superb critical thinker, excellent debater, and, overall a very highly intelligent person. And I would love to meet him one day. I really would. I sort of like hold him to like celebrity status even, I think he's really cool. And I've actually read a couple of his books. the human predicament is one, and never to have been, I think, was the other one. And I
Yeah.
really resonated a lot with what he said. Have you guys read any of his stuff at all, or are you familiar with any of his works? Or
Yeah. Better Never to Have Been was a big book for me for sure when I was learning
Mhm.
about antinatalism, like, I don't know, 2009-ish or so, something like
Yeah,
that. I think his book came out in 2006 or so.
yeah, I think
But
so. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I haven't read the Human Predicament though. Yeah, I've just been lazy on that, but
I've
but
actually got it on my
better.
Kindle. Yeah, I have to say, I haven't like read it word for word. I've kind of like skimmed over it a bit, and I've kind of like looked at the chapters that I was most interested in first. But yeah, I definitely want to revisit it and read it in its entirety because, like I say, I think he's just a brilliant writer. I don't know, like, I mean, obviously he's not for everyone, but for me, I just love his writing style, and he's very what's the word? Let me think. Well, he's very mysterious. I mean, for one thing, you can't find, there's no photo of him at all that's on the internet. He's a very private person. And I
Hmm.
understand why, given, the controversial stuff that he talks about. I
Yeah.
remember he was being interviewed by, can't exactly remember who it was, but he was saying that, during his time working as a philosopher, and especially in the realm of antinatalism, he's been, like he's had several death threats. And
Oh,
yeah, I know. So I think it's fair to say that he kind of wants to keep a bit of a low profile, as I would too, I guess, if I was in that situation. But
yeah.
yeah.
I was really amazed to hear this conversation with Sam Harris. He was on Sam
Oh
Harris's Making
yeah, yes,
Sense,
I've heard that. I've heard that one.
and
Yeah, it's brilliant.
it was kind of it was a little bit of a bummer for me because
Oh really?
I held Sam Harris in high regard up until that day because his moral landscape books and whatever his atheism debates were like a huge influence of my deconversion,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
15 years ago or so. And his discussion with Benatar that day was interesting. How it
Uh-huh.
seemed, I don't know, it just seemed he seemed to not understand a lot of it, for one, and two, he
Uh-huh.
had kind of a little bit of a glib attitude towards it. And
Yeah, actually, I
it's
agree with you. I agree with you, actually. I was actually a bit disappointed in him as well. Like, I also enjoy a bit of Sam Harris's stuff. I'm not a huge fan, I would say, but I like the fact. Well, look, I also don't believe in the notion of free will as he does as well. So, but yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, while I did enjoy his discussion with David Benatar, like, I mean, I think he was spot on with the fact that he seemed a bit glib and a bit sort of, not being able to quite grasp the fundamentals of what Benatar was trying to sort of, put out there.
yeah,
But yeah, and obviously Sam Harris is a very smart guy, but yet again, I have to say, I think David really run rings around him, in terms of, presenting himself from an intellectual, perspective. And
yeah.
yeah, but anyway, so another video with Benatar. Did you listen to the one where he had a bit of a debate with Jordan Peterson?
Benatar?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I did actually. Yeah, I do. I remember being really frustrated with that one because
Oh, I
Jordan
know.
Peterson.
Oh,
He's
exactly. It's just, I just wanted to wring his neck, actually. It's just like, and I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson at all, for one thing. I don't know. I don't think he's got a very nice personality at all. He's got like a bit of a temper issue, I think. And he
yeah.
just,
It was like anger issues or something.
yeah, I know. And he's meant to be a psychologist at that. And obviously, once again, Benatar upstaged him in terms of, arguments and whatnot. Benatar just demolishes Peterson, if you ask me. And yeah, and I mean, it was great to listen to. But again, yeah, I was just really frustrated because, as Benatar highlighted, Jordan Peterson just kept on revisiting some of the old things, lines of argument that he was, talking about previously. and, you know,
Hmm.
skirting around certain issues and whatnot. And it just really irritated me. And I so felt David's frustrations there. I really did. But it was
Yeah,
really
because it,
nice how it ended. I really liked how, I don't know if you can remember, but how it ended and the things that David said. I can't exactly remember what he said, but he kind of left things, you know, on a nice positive note. But anyway, so philosophy has been a big influence in my life, and I'm drawn to things like, you know, anything to do with existentialism and philosophical pessimism, which is something I've recently been introduced to. Can't remember if this is going. I looked at listened to one of Amanda's podcasts, and she was interviewing a guy called Michael someone. Forgive me, I can't remember his last name. All that I can remember is I think his last name contained 2 L's. That's all I can remember. And his father has written a book about nuclear issues. I think he used to be involved in nuclear, something to do with nuclear warfare or planning or something of that ilk. And
oh yeah,
do you know who I'm talking about?
yeah,
He's a
yeah, I remember
freelance
that.
writer as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, so he sort of, you know, threw out the term like philosophical pessimism, and, you know, talked a little bit about that. And I thought, oh, you know, that sounds interesting. So, and, you know, it mentioned a few people like, sorry, that's my cockatiel in the background, my pet parrot. Yeah, so people like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and Sharon, you know, those particular philosophers, I would definitely like to sort of find out more about. So yeah,
Yeah,
this is all new kind of content for me. And the thing is, for a lot of people who, I don't know, maybe depressed or not, you know, like to read some of like the stuff that these guys produce, you know, I mean, it can go either way. Like it can either like really depress you, but in my you know, the way I see it, and Michael also said this too, I think it actually has the opposite effect for me. It actually comforts me and makes me feel better. I
yeah.
don't know if you
Me-
guys feel the same, but
Oh yeah, totally. It's like, you know, like you found a friend that you just didn't even know also has your same interest. I mean, that's the reason why people go to bars on a Monday night to watch the football game, because it's like
yeah, yeah.
they're all there because they love football, you know. And
Hmm.
it was great, even if it was a negative topics, dark topics, facing harsh truth of reality, and, you know, the nature
Hmm.
of existence, all this. I was still just like, oh great, this is awesome. Like I've always in
Mm.
my head been a kind of thinking about that stuff, you know, but I really haven't. I didn't study any of that either until, I don't know, 15
Hmm.
years ago or so.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too. A lot of the things that people find, dark or depressing, like I actually, like you, Melanie, I find a lot of comfort in that,
Hmm.
because I appreciate reality, realism,
Hmm.
people who speak their truth,
Hmm.
unashamedly and unabashedly. So yeah, like a lot of things people are like, oh, that's depressing. And I'm like, no, that's just realism, so I
Exactly.
appreciate
Well,
that too.
yeah, I mean, there is a term called depressive realism. And yeah, and the thing is, yeah, I mean, there's so many people, they just don't want to dive that deep, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, but for me, more than anything, it's just been a good friend to me.
Yeah, totally. And people, and the opposite side of it is the causation of a lot of anti-right to die stuff is the toxic positivity or optimism, you know, which,
Mm.
you know, when you go into the depressive realism stuff, it's like sticking a mirror in someone's face and just being like
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
denial, you know, like, oh
Oh
wait,
yeah.
what? Like, I don't
Yeah.
really have, you know, this pimple. And it's like, yeah, you do. Look, it's right there.
Hmm.
No, 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 I don't have. It's like
Yeah,
the
that's
the
an easy way of
power
putting it.
of that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, but yeah, no. So philosophy is great, and also, I love science too. And another thing that gives me comfort is knowing that we're nothing but a mere speck in the universe. And again, some people might find this terribly depressing, but on the contrary, I don't. And and for example, I don't know, if you think of someone having an argument with another person about something, and and thinking, oh, whatever you're arguing about is such a big deal, and it's the end of the world or whatever. But if you were to actually zoom out from that situation and look at it from a more macro, more broader perspective, I mean, it's almost meaningless in the greater scheme of things, and it just highlights just how easy humans get, caught up in all these petty matters. And I don't know, to me, it just doesn't seem to make much sense, So,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I love that too. Yeah, as far as just grasping the weight of like the bigger picture type stuff, and like, man, like my little problem of my phone bill or my aching toe or whatever. I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
man, I mean, that's kind of when it comes to the right to die. It's, to me, that's they're interconnected, because I can think,
Yeah.
hey, like if I just don't exist, I won't have these problems. And to not have a problems, just like Benatar says,
Yeah.
no, the non-existence of a bad is a good by default.
Yes.
Like, it just is.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, for
yeah.
sure. I totally agree. And and talking about science and scientists. Another person who I really like and admire is Robert Sapolsky. Have you heard of him at all?
No, who's that?
So he is I think a Jewish American guy, and I'm pretty sure he is still I think he works at Stanford, and he has like Sam Harris, he has a background in neuroscience, and he's also a
Mm.
primatologist as well. I think back about 30 years ago or so, he did some a famous study on baboons in Kenya. So he's quite well known for that. But so like Sam Harris, he also does not believe in free will. He's called what he refers himself as a hard determinist,
Mhm.
sorry. And basically that kind of means, like basically everything that's happened to us is traced all the way back to the Big Bang, So I don't know, you
Yeah.
make one decision, which leads to another decision, which leads to another, and so on and so on. So
Mhm.
basically, in essence, I think he's kind of saying that, our lives are predetermined. But having said that, that's not to say that we just sit back and do nothing. I mean, obviously, we lead our lives. We do the best we can, and we just don't sit there, thinking, oh, what's going to happen next, kind of thing. Like it's kind of like not that. I don't think. I think basically, as I see it, like you still go about your life. You put in as much effort as you can. You try to do your best, blah blah blah, and then it kind of reaches a point where the external forces take over, so to speak, and
Yeah.
and I really like his way of looking at things, and he's written a couple of really awesome books. I haven't read them yet because I just haven't had the time, but I love to. One of them's called Behave: The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst. And his latest book, I think, is called Determined: Life Without Free Will. And I've watched a few of
Nice.
his. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, that's my Siri going off. I'm not sure. Where was I going with this? Sorry, Siri interrupted me. No, it's Siri on my Apple Watch. Sorry. He basically
See, that was determined to happen.
Oh
you
yeah,
had no
well there
free
you
will
go.
over that.
There you go. Yeah. So anyway, he was saying that even though he doesn't believe in free will, we still have to lead our lives as though we do have free will, because basically, okay, for example, if you think of the criminal justice system, which is based on free will, it's based on the fact that if you commit a crime, like it comes down to, well, okay, well, you had free will, you had a choice whether to do that or not. And for him to say, well, actually, no, free will doesn't exist at all, that basically dismantles the whole legal system, basically, So anyway, he actually, even though he does not believe in free will himself, he actually advises that, we really do still have to lead our lives as though we do have free will, because, it can potentially cause a lot of problems in a way. And I think a lot of people would feel quite unsettled by that notion, because I think most people would like to think that they have control in their lives. And that,
Yeah. I wonder if like living your life as if there's free will is sort of just an illusion you've created for yourself that, makes you feel like you're the driver of the car, and
yeah,
like you've really never had a, say in the matter of whether you were into, whatever molestation of whatever, or like the life that you grew up and the experiences that developed who you are, and you never had a say in that. So I think prison system is a lot about deterrence rather
yes,
than you've made it a choice. It's more of just, if this happens, here's the consequences.
yeah,
um
yeah, totally,
so
yeah,
but no, that'd be cool. I'd like to read that for sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'd
just
like to say. Oh, sorry.
sorry,
I'd like to
Ashley,
say
yeah,
something too. Another thing I want to bring up is that I think that a lot of people like to feel like they're in control of their lives and like they have free will and stuff, because like when they have suffering, like whether they had a bad childhood, or like Kevin said, maybe they were molested or something, like, a lot of people like to believe
yeah,
that there was a purpose in the suffering. But
yeah,
if
for
it's just,
sure,
yeah, but if like determinism is it is really what's going on, then it's like, oh, the suffering was pointless, and a lot of people just can't handle that.
yeah. No, I totally agree. I really do. And and he does say that, look, there are so many different variables that make up, who we are, the person who we are today. And he talks about things like, it goes back to what our ancestors were like, what our fetal environment was like, the kind of childhood we had, our genes, all these different factors.
Obviously we never had consent to be born,
Yeah,
and we never
yeah,
asked to be born in the environment that we, and the families and the culture that we were born into. And who knows what all kinds of abuses we could have gone through. I mean, I had a pretty good childhood. I mean,
yeah,
it was
same.
great, but it's
I
like
mean, it wasn't
I'm
idyllic,
still,
but yeah,
it's not a prerequisite, I guess is all I'm saying. Like you
yeah,
also don't have to have a bad childhood to be like, oh yeah, the right to die, whatever. Like
yeah,
it's
sure,
just logical. That's all. It's a lot of it's just based on logic and prevention. Like if you, it's better to me. It's always better to get out earlier than it is later, and it's just
yeah,
the one of those really hard truths to face. Because you could be like, I could check out today, and I know it sounds like inciting, but it's not. It's just some logic. It's like if you knew tomorrow that you were gonna get mangled in some car accident, and you're gonna live 20 years, 30 years in surgeries and not walking, and you know what I mean, like, but you
yeah,
had the option
yeah,
today to check out, like,
yeah,
you would want to, take
yeah,
that right if it was available.
for sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, slightly going off topic. Have you heard of this school of thought where there are some people out there who believe that you actually choose your own family? Like when you're born, you choose the family you go into, or something bizarre like that?
Yes,
You
I
choose.
have actually. My
Oh, have you?
grandma, yeah, my grandma, my mom's mom, she actually prescribes to that belief. That she thinks like we sign like a soul contract with like with the people that we're going to be in, a lifetime with, and so you choose your
Oh,
family, you choose who you want to like who your partner is going to be, and like, yeah, so her sort of thought is like a soul contract. I'm not sure if that's where you were going with it, but she kind
Yeah,
of prescribes
yeah.
to that same way of thinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
gee. Yes, I can't understand that at all. To me, like, I don't know. That seems a bit woohoo to me, really. Like,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but anyway, but moving on. Yeah. So anyway, so like on the subject of death, I've faced death in the dying process more than once, having been there during my late nan and granddad's final moments. And it really angered me that more could have been done to ease their pain and reduce their suffering. And as much as I didn't want them to leave, they should have had the right to have had a more peaceful end, via, euthanasia. And as much as, I so wanted them to sort of still be with me and to still be on the earthly realm and whatnot, I didn't want my own selfishness to sort of override their right, to have that sort of peaceful way out and whatnot. And, and of course, like the doctors and the nurses and whatnot, they've got the means to do that, but, they can't. And I distinctly remember Granddad when he was on his deathbed, bless him, and he was actually calling out, let me go, let me go. And he was obviously in so much pain, and it pained me to see him suffer like that. It really did. And fortuitously, he kind of went downhill quite quickly compared to Nana. Nana, on the other hand, she like battled on for a couple of weeks. Mum and I were there with her the whole time in the palliative care ward. The only exception was when we would quickly duck back home for a shower and then come straight back. So basically we were there the whole time by her side. We ate there, we slept next to her. And look, I will say that on the whole, the doctors and nurses were lovely. But this didn't detract from the fact that, so much more could have been done to prevent, her added suffering. And
Yeah.
and when she was near the end, I remember, the nurses having to turn her over every so often, every few hours, on the bed, so she didn't get bed sores. And I could see this was agonizing for her, like just being turned
Gosh.
over. And the empathic side of me, I was going through that agony with her as well. And and again, just witnessing, the dying and death process of Nana and Grandad, that's also been a huge motivator for me to become, more involved in the Right to Die movement. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, have you both witnessed, the dying process of like someone close to you? Or
Yeah, I watched my dad die. Yeah, he had strokes and he
Oh.
had COPD, and he was
Oh dear, I'm
like
sorry.
yeah, it was really hard. He got to a place where he just didn't even know who I was,
Oh really?
and I would, it was like the effects of his strokes, it messed up his memory, and it was really hard. So it was almost like stroke turned into Alzheimer's in a way, and it was so hard to talk to him and sit there and talk, and he looks at me with this dead face that's like, you know what I mean? And then he'd just say some
Yeah.
random thing, and it was hard. Yeah. I was
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
and it made me, it was a lot of anger there as far as the Right to Die goes, because
Yep.
I knew that my dad made a, like, sorry, I should say my mom made a promise to my dad that if he was ever really suffering, she wouldn't let him suffer. But that
Yep.
was like the end of their conversation, and a lot of that,
Uh-huh.
maybe, there was reasons why it halted so quickly. Maybe religion, maybe it was just a hard truth that they didn't really want to face, like denial. But they
Yeah.
got to a place where it's like, I'm not going to allow you to suffer. Don't worry. I'm going to be there with you, and I'm not going to let you. But it's like, well, you kind of have to have a plan if if you're,
Yeah. Yeah.
really, if you're really actually saying, I'm gonna, not let your spouse suffer. Like, yeah, there still has to be like, what's your intention then? You can't
Yeah.
just say it. And that's what happened. My mom sat back and didn't do anything. We all sat back and didn't do anything, and I was really angry for a long, like the whole duration
Yeah,
of it. I
understandably,
was so pissed
understandably.
off. I was just thinking, just like, what the fuck? Like, why can't he just swallow a pill? Why can't he just swallow
Mm.
the pill? If you know what I mean, like
Yeah, it's
whatever
such
the
a
pill
simple
is,
thing, isn't it? It's such a simple
I
thing.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's just ridiculous. But like, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important for everyone to have, I think, what you call an advance directive. So basically, it's a legal document stating that should I end up with dementia or become in a vegetative state, I want this to happen for myself, to switch off the life support machine or whatnot, So,
Mhm.
there's no messiness or gray areas in terms of, what should we do in this situation?
So my dad, I didn't see him die. He didn't die in a hospital or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he had severe depression, very, very severe depression. And he talked about wanting to die at the age of, I was 12, and he would tell me, man, I just wish I could stop breathing. I just want to
Gee.
just not breathe anymore. And I just want the big sleep. He'd say that to me, and
How did
I
that affect
appreciated.
you emotionally at such a young age, Ashley? Because that's a pretty heavy thing to be told.
Well, it was, but I appreciated his honesty, because I was starting to have depression too, so I kind of understood it a little bit,
Okay, yeah,
and I
sure.
appreciated that he was just being honest. But anyway, yeah, like instead of what Kevin was saying, like instead of just being given a simple peaceful pill to swallow, he killed himself by slow suicide, basically
Gee,
because
I'm so sorry.
yeah, thank you. He turned to alcoholism. He turned to drugs. He was diabetic, and one day, he passed away, and when he was found, they discovered that he really had just given up. He'd run out of insulin. He'd run out of propane for his trailer. There was drugs everywhere. Like, it was such a slow, agonizing suicide. And
Mm,
He'd had depression since his teenage
yeah.
years, and he was 38. So I mean, it was a long battle he had
Mm,
for no good
gee.
reason.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
other
for
than
no
he
good
needs to be
reason.
alive.
That I'm really sorry to hear that, and yeah, it's shocking. Yeah, it really is. Um,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, but like touching upon when Kevin mentioned about his dad's situation and whatnot. Nana didn't have Alzheimer's. She had dementia, but she had short-term dementia. So luckily, she still recognized Mum and I, and plus, we'd go in practically every day in the nursing home before she came sick. We'd go basically and see her every day. So I mean, at least it was good that yes, she knew who we were and all that kind of thing. It was basically she just would repeat herself a lot, and she may have just eaten a meal, but she still felt hungry. She still felt as though hadn't eaten anything, just things like that. So it wasn't like super bad, but at the same time, I mean, it wouldn't have been great either. um, but yeah, but anyway, so I've had that experience of watching both my grandparents die and meet death. And on the subject of that, I have also lost people close to me by suicide as well. So I had an uncle. So he's my mum's brother. He took his life back in 2008. And I have to say, I try my best to refrain from using the word committing suicide, because for one thing, to me, it sounds very harsh, and it's also suggestive of committing a crime. And I strongly believe that
Mm,
suicide isn't a crime,
yeah.
period. So, I mean, I try my best to not use that terminology if I can. But anyway, I
Hmm.
just wanted to sort of like, insert that in there. But anyway, so my uncle took his own life, and also I suspected a distant cousin of mine took his life as well. But it was portrayed more of being an accident. I mean, it couldn't be proved either way whether he took his own life or whether it was an accident. And the family went with the whole, I think it's an accident, for the sake of that whole shame thing, I guess, that comes with, losing someone from from them taking their own lives. I think they just thought it was easier and more accepting, more socially accepted, to say, oh, he died through misadventure rather than, wanting to end his life. So that's the script that they were running with. But excuse me, but I in the heart of hearts, I had this gut feeling that no, it wasn't an accident. He took his own life, and there were reasons for that. Like, I mean, I didn't know him incredibly well, but I knew that he was going through a few issues. He'd recently turned 30, and he still didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, and various other things. And I don't know, it just all made sense to me. Yeah, so I think that's what he did. But yeah, so basically I've had my fair share of death related situations. So
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's rough.
Yeah.
And especially if, I bet it's so hard to know the truth, and yet everyone's quiet and doesn't talk about it and sweeps it under
Yep.
the rug and creates this like taboo out of it, and for no reason. Like,
Yeah.
what it's so funny how so many people alive all the time can just be like, oh, life sucks, I don't want to, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's, I
Yeah.
mean, stand-up comedians say it is, and everyone laughs like it's a agreed upon kind of thing, that
Well, don't
like,
they say that most comedians have depression?
yeah, I've heard that that's kind of
I've heard that,
a theme.
and they use their humor as a way, as a shield to cover it or something. I don't know. I've heard that sort of being thrown out there.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, especially the dark comedy types.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, yeah, I'm going to get a bit personal here. I'm going to sort of talk about myself in this regard. So,
Oh, please.
yeah, I mean, I too over the years have attempted to take my own life multiple times. My first attempt was when I was 17. And funnily enough, that was like 2 years after I had been put on psych meds, which I found interesting because I was put on psych meds when I was 15, had never felt suicidal at all as a child or anything like that. And 2 years having been on psych meds, I become suicidal, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. So anyway, I've also had 6 hospitalizations throughout my life, which I'll touch upon a bit later in the podcast. I've lost count of how many doctors and psychologists I've seen over the years who, of whom did more harm than good, I have to say. But, amidst all the mental health mayhem that I endured, I've had a few good times along the way as well in life. I've been fortunate enough to have traveled extensively. I've lived in 3 different countries. I've lived in Scotland, Jordan. I've lived in Dubai. I visited around 22 different countries.
Cool.
I was living as an expat with a former partner of mine back in 2009. So in 2009, I lived in Amman, which is the capital of Jordan in the Middle East. And the following year, in 2010, I lived in Dubai. And that's like the time where I did most of my travel because, as you know, Australia is like so far away from like everywhere else. And because, I was based in the Middle East and, a lot closer to Europe, and I did a lot of traveling around the Middle East as well. So, I've been to places like Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, even back in 2009 before, they had their, all the stuff going on there. So I was very fortunate, to have seen that for myself. I thought Damascus, the capital of Syria, was absolutely beautiful. I had, the best ice cream ever there. It was lovely, creamy vanilla ice cream with pistachio nuts, and the architecture was beautiful and whatever. And I assume now it's, been all blown to smithereens, which is just, like a crying shame. Anyway, but if you were to ask me what my favorite city in the world is, it would have to be hands down New York. I love it. I was like there like exactly 10 years ago. And and I had plans to visit there early this year, but that turned out to be a complete disaster and makes for an interesting story itself. But what happened there will also be included in my manuscript if it ever gets published, so you can read it there. But yeah, it's a bit of a story. But anyway, so like depending on how my life unfolds, I have ambitions to become a freelance writer on all things death related, because I just find it a fascinating topic. I'm
Nice.
actually in the process of starting to get a portfolio of work together for that. I believe I have to submit about 20 different papers, just like sample papers, just so people out there can get a bit of a feel of my writing style and whatnot and stuff. So I'm busy sort of beavering away on that.
Wow.
Should that go well, I hope to re-enter the world of academia to study a PhD. And the subject that I so want to study with a passion is thanatology. And so thanatology is basically death-related studies.
Oh, cool.
And you can look at it through a variety of different perspectives. So there's the sociological perspective, the historical perspective, the psychological, the ethical, and the spiritual perspective of death. And I'm like, oh wow, that just sounds like super cool to me. So there's lots of like different sort of areas that I can tap into there. Like I said, I've already got a background in sociology and history and stuff. So yeah, I have a real interest for that. And I really don't know how many thanatologists are out there, to be honest. I mean, it's not something that I didn't even know what thanatology was until a few weeks ago, to be honest. But yeah, so anyway, I'm super passionate and interested in that. And I'm just sort of seeing how everything evolves. And it's quite an exciting time for me in that regard. So
Yeah, that's very cool. I wouldn't even know where to start with that. And then like, congrats. Like, I hope when do you like, how does that look as far as when you think you'll be finished? Like, do you have a percentage that you think you're in on it, or as far as being done, or are you already done, or?
Oh God, no, I've just started. Like, I've contacted a couple of my academic friends and I asked them, look, I've got a bachelor's, I've got a master's degree. What's the pathway to get a PhD? What's the pathway to get published? And one of my friends, his name's Dr. Lionel Nichols, and he's a barrister based in London, and we used to go to school together. And he's actually worked on some pretty high profile cases in the past. He was involved in the, do you remember the phone hacking case with Rupert Murdoch and a few other people?
I don't think so.
A few years ago. Yeah, anyway, well, it was a high profile case. He was involved in that. He was also involved in the Blood Diamond case. And, they made a movie about it with Leo DiCaprio.
Geez, I'm coming up empty on that one. I don't know.
And also the Rolf Harris case as well. That was quite high profile as well. So anyway, like, he was an awesome person for me to seek advice and stuff, and basically said, like, it is possible for me to publish academic papers without being a PhD student. So my plan is to start getting my portfolio of stuff together to put forward to a particular organization that can help me get into freelance writing. And from that, I want to see if I can pave my way into studying a PhD in thanatology. So yeah, I've got a rough idea of where I want to go.
Nice.
And the funny thing is, it's like, I've tried I actually started off studying law at uni, and I was one of those people where I had no idea what I wanted to study. I had so many different interests. I'm a polymath, interested in so many different things. And and I tried a smorgasbord of subjects. I did things, like in marketing and political science, and I just had no idea where I wanted to go. Whereas my best friend, like, she's a vet, and she wanted to be a vet since she was 8, since she was 3. But for me, it was the total opposite. And but I think I've found my calling now, and it's taken me so long. But it's funny because, I've just come to realize, what I really want to do in life now is to study death.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's like, isn't that funny? Like,
Yes.
yeah. So I think that, I'm really interested in it. And, and I don't see it as a morbid topic. I think, obviously it's something that's inevitable. It's something that we're all going to face. People need to, have help in terms with how they grieve. There is such an entrenched anti-death culture, especially in the Western world. I think we really need to, have a look at that, unpack that, and kind of think, well, that we really need to change our perspective on that and have a bit more positivity in that sort of, and anyway, I hope to hopefully be one of the driving forces that would help, like in that change, to make people think a bit differently about these things, and to not feel so, for not to be such a morbid and negative thing. So yeah, that's my passion. I think that's what I want to do with the rest of my life.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting that you bring that up, Melanie, because me and Kevin were actually just talking about that earlier today on the phone. I was telling him how, especially in America, in the U.S., funerals are so depressing. Like, I think they should be about a celebration of life, and
definitely.
I mean,
and
definitely, cry if you need to too. But our funerals here are super depressing, and so like I was telling Kevin, like I think like what people should do is like when somebody passes away, grieve, take the time, a week, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, to cry it all out and stuff like that. But like then have the funeral, because then you can actually talk about the person and like make it more of a celebration, because you spent all that time crying and grieving, and you're it's kind of out of your system a little bit more, and it can be more positive.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense. And another thing to be mindful of is that, I mean, obviously, people grieve in different ways. So, you could have someone who just, totally falls apart right after, it's happened. And then for some people, it can take, weeks, months, even years for it to really hit home and realize, oh, I don't have that person in my life anymore. So anyway, but I totally agree with you, Ashley. Like it needs to be a celebratory thing, and to look at it and just to think of all like the good things in life that person, had, and their experiences, and
people get really obsessed about like, how the person died, and it seems to tarnish their whole life, even if they died in some crazy gruesome way or whatever, and especially if suicide especially, because everyone is just kind of like, oh my gosh, like suicide, and then it just kind of like demeans the rest of their life and valuing the rest of their life, like, oh, but what about when they were 20, you know what I mean, and they accomplished some crazy cool thing or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's far too much focus on how the death happened, and that detracts, as you're saying, from their actual life and their accomplishments, and, all the good times and everything else is, like the fact of how they went out, like can cast this, dark shadow over everything else. So, yeah, I totally hear you on that point. But like I can talk about that some more, but I just want to sort of follow on to like my next topic, if that's okay.
Oh yeah.
I just sort of want to sort of just sort of touch upon some of the negative experiences I've had with pro-life oppression.
Okay.
So I mean, it certainly wasn't as bad as some people's stories. I've never been like restrained or force-fed meds or anything like that, but I've definitely had my fair share of unpleasantness. The abuse I suffered was more of a psychological kind, which is extremely punishing in its own way. So little did I realize at the time, I was in fact a recipient of a certain type of violence, and I'll explain about this in a little bit. But it wasn't until I did some investigative research in some academic journals that I learned what had actually happened to me at the hands of these so-called psychiatric professionals. And just as a side note, I just want to say that I don't particularly like using the word victim. And I can totally understand why others may choose to use it, and that's cool. If they're happy with using it, then that's fine. But for me, I don't know. I think it invites pity, and I don't want to be pitied, so I kind of try and not use that terminology. But I respectively, obviously, understand those who do. But anyway, so the worst instance of pro-life oppression for me was when I was hospitalised, having just arrived back to Tassie from a 4-month ordeal living in Glasgow. And again, that's highlighted in my manuscript, the whole story about that. So I was pretty much interrogated by a panel of 3 doctors, all with their separate folders, waiting to jot down all their notes about me. I'm sure you can sort of visualize, the scenario there. The whole setup itself was very intimidating. And it just highlighted the huge power differential that exists between doctor and patient. And in this case, it was, 3 doctors versus 1 patient. So from the very beginning of that consultation, I felt extremely uncomfortable.
Sure.
Anyway, so one of the doctors asked me a question, and when one of the doctors asked me a question, the others were like looking on and observing me whilst writing down God knows what in their folders. And not only did I feel like a criminal, I felt like a science exhibit. I felt as though I was being forensically picked apart, and it was such a violating feeling. It was just like yuck, And as the questioning progressed, one of the doctors became increasingly nasty, basically telling me that I was worthless. And look, I was already suicidal, and being subjected to this was making me more so. So, I couldn't understand why he thought saying all of these disgusting and degrading things to me would be of benefit, let alone therapeutic. I just thought, gee, it's just, And anyway, and looking back at that, I sometimes kick myself because at the time I was unable to intellectually defend myself because I was just so shut down, with the depression and everything else that I was feeling, because otherwise I would have really got stuck into him. I really would have done. But, I just wasn't in that state of mind where I could, And so I was barely able to say anything whilst he was dishing out all this crap to me, excuse my French. And just the uncaring, uncompassionate, untherapeutic, and extremely unprofessional way this consultation was delivered just made me think to myself, these people, they need to be deregistered from their medical license, I thought to myself, they're the ones who are unworthy, unworthy of the title doctor, whose main job it is to supposedly help people, because they were doing the exact opposite. And it just makes my blood boil just thinking about that. Anyway, so that particular hospital admission lasted about 10 days. And and nearer the time of my discharge, I had a more clear state of mind, and I thought about making my own notes about how I was treated, with the aim of potentially making a complaint. I don't know what it's like in the States, but here there is some scope in terms of making a complaint, as stipulated in the Mental Health Act here. But seriously, I mean, what would have come of that? To have a patient's, like a psych patient's word against 3 doctors, as if they're going to side with the psych patient over 3 supposed medical experts. It just won't happen. And I don't know, if there have been any successful cases of people doing that here. I don't know. I haven't done any research on that, but I'd be surprised if there are. But anyway, though there was the impetus for me to make a complaint, part of me just didn't have the energy. And sometimes you have to choose your own battles in life. And, I just really needed to focus on my recovery more than anything else. And also I was worried about how I would document the information. I didn't always have access to my phone, so I didn't have much of an opportunity to make notes on that. I was also concerned, had I written things down on paper, that maybe someone would find it and I'd be in even more, inverted commas, trouble. I realize the importance of documenting things as soon as you can after the fact, so that you can give a more, the most accurate depiction of what has happened. But given that so much time has elapsed since that hospital admission, I can honestly say that a lot of it I can remember as though it was yesterday. I really can. So that was probably one of the worst experiences for me in that regard, in terms of the nastiness I received. But there were also lots of other awful things that I experienced over the course of my 6 hospital stays. Other things, for example, my privacy would often get violated. Nurses would often barge into my room whilst I was on the phone to someone, and they would rudely ask who I was talking to. I was often made fun of by the staff, who would, make a lot of sarcastic remarks. There was one time when I refused to eat, and I was due to have a consultation with one of the hospital nutritionalists. And one of the nurses basically said, oh, why bother, wasting your time? Why bother her wasting your time on you, whilst at the same time telling me that, she wouldn't allow me to just curl up in a corner and die, So she was kind of saying very contradictory things. And it certainly wasn't said from the depths of her heart, that's for sure. And having said that, she went on to say, oh, I'm just doing my job, so, as if to basically say she didn't care about me at all, she was just doing her job. And I also remember that same nurse making the most horrible comment of all to me, which I sadly probably would never forget. She was talking to me about some of the more undesirable patients that have stayed at the hospital. And when I told her that I thought I was an awful person for feeling so low, she said, and this will forever be tattooed on my brain, she said, quote, well, we've even had to treat pedophiles here before, so at least you're not one of those, inverted commas. And I thought to myself, you bitch, lowering, excuse my French, lowering me down to someone who's almost on par with a pedophile, because to me that's how it came across, is abhorrent. And it hit me even harder, given that I used to be a primary school teacher, given that I have a godson, given that I love children, I would never wish any harm on any children. For her to say that, that really had such a profoundly negative effect on me. For her to say that, it was like poison to my ears. And I'd even go as far to say is that I've been psychologically traumatized by that remark. And funnily enough, this particular nurse, she was a Christian.
Oh,
so
wow.
there you have it. Like, honestly, I was just, I just get so angry, just like, so anyway, and there've been so many times when I've had suicide prevention paraphernalia thrust upon me, whether it be information pamphlets, suicide hotlines to call. Most of the literature I was given, I just rip it up and just throw it straight in the bin. And I actually found it an insult, because these suicide preventionists, are just so dismissive and disrespectful, of one's desire to want an alternative to life. They just can't see
it any way other than from their perspective, you know.
Yeah.
And there's a plethora of other things I could mention on this, but if I did, I think we'd be here forever. So I mean, I could bag out the psychiatry establishment all day. I really could, but you know, life's too short. And I have one other topic that I wouldn't mind to touch upon, if that's cool.
Yeah.
The term suicidism. I came across this term not so long ago, and I found it really interesting. It's not to be confused with the term suicidology. That's a particular field of study which is more concerned with the more objective third person knowledge of suicide, which, you know, is a very limited view of suicide because, you know, it discounts the subjective view, which I'm sure, you know, everyone agrees is the most important view of all. So I was very disappointed reading some of these academic papers because they were only showcasing only one part of the story. And having done some further research, however, I came across the interesting term of suicidism, which I've never heard before. So what is it? So basically, it's an all-encompassing term. It includes things like the oppression of suicidal people. So, for example, incarceration and violence. Examples of suicidist violence are things like, you know, forced incarceration, removal of agency, social and relational abandonment, unequal power relations between the suicidal and the non-suicidal, the structural silencing of suicidal people's voices. And there's actually a term for this. It's called epistemic violence. And that's a form of violence that I actually received countless times. So, for example, someone telling you that, oh, you know, suicide isn't an option, or that taking your own life is not your decision, it's a matter for God, you know, that kind of thing. So basically like shutting you down. So that's what that means. And another form of violence is what you call testimonial smothering. And I'm pretty sure on one of your podcasts, Kevin, I can't remember which one it was, but you were talking about how you went to some kind of, it was like a suicide prevention day or something, and you went to some kind of gathering. And anyway, it just made me think of you in regards to that. So basically, this term means like when, you know, marginalized groups testify publicly about their experiences, but they're encouraged by their organisers to voluntarily conceal parts of their testimonials or to transfer their messages in order to make them more palatable to a certain audience. So, for example, you know, like some disabled people might be tempted to soften their critiques of ableism in the media in order to convince the audience about the importance of universal accessibility. And when I say the word ableism, you know, that refers to the discrimination of people with physical or mental disabilities. So, so testimonial smothering, that's a form of violence. So this discrimination, you know, this dominant script, you know, silences and invalidates the suicidal person's feelings and experiences. And these scripts are mainly written by non-suicidal people. Surprise, surprise, people such as scientists, healthcare professionals, suicide prevention activists, family, friends, the ex-suicidal people, who seek to speak for suicidal people and who assume that they know, you know, what's best for them. So that's the oppression side of things. And
these are all crimes that go, you know, unpunished. You know, everyone gets away with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just despicable. And so anyway, that's kind of like one aspect of suicidism, and another aspect is the stigmatization of suicide. So, you know, a lot of people regard suicide as a morally shameful act. So, for example, as I highlighted, you know, with my cousin, you know, and my family kind of choosing to opt for he had an accident rather than, he took his own life, because of that kind of potential shame that, you know, that they could have experienced from that. Another aspect of suicidism is the pathological, I can't say this, pathologization, sorry, of suicide, and that more than not involves like traumatizing like suicide prevention strategies, like being forcefully drugged, locked up, often both
Mm-hmm.
these things, being judged as subhuman. And the sad thing of all is that the mere threat of such things can make someone try to take their own life much sooner. And a lot
Yeah.
of these, suicide prevention strategies are doing far more harm than good. And interestingly, the term suicidism isn't mentioned by any of the major models of suicidality. And these models are, you've got like the medical / psychiatric model, you've got the social model, you've got the psychosocial model. I won't go into any depth on them here because of time restraints, but what I will say is that even the allegedly anti-oppressive models of suicide, such as the social model, it doesn't even acknowledge the term suicidism, which I both find intriguing and strange.
Mm-hmm.
So this highlights the need for this term to be better recognized and understood, and and to be put out there more, put out there into the mainstream, so that we can all have a more open and honest discussion about these things, whilst not being continually shut down by the suicide preventionist script. Okay, yeah, so I'm more than happy to shoot through some resources about that through email or otherwise, and also including some academic articles from this wonderful academic, Alexandra Barrell, a Canadian academic. Alexandra's associate professor, I believe, at the School of Social Work at the University of Ottawa. And Alexandra, writes about this kind of stuff. I've made contact with Alexandra and we've had a few pleasant exchanges. And and Alexandra's recently published a book called Undoing Suicidism. It approaches the subject from a trans, queer and quip perspective. But undoubtedly, I'm sure it provides invaluable insights to all of us who are interested in matters surrounding the right to die.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. Any information is the more we can share, the better, because it's the more there's out there. I know it's a hard fight to fight, but gosh, anything out there is great, because there's people out there I know that they think they're on the right side of the battlefield, and they might come along this Undoing Suicidism book and be like just overwhelmed, just like, what the hell? I've been thinking the wrong thing this whole time, like at least we can hope, there's a conversions along the way.
Well, knowledge is power, so yeah, but anyway, so I just in closing, because I've only got like so long to talk, but I just sort of like to sort of talk about the activism side of things, and whether I consider myself as an activist. Obviously, that depends on what you actually mean by the word activism, I guess. Personally, I'm probably not the type to go out in the streets and protest, only because I don't think that's not my strength. I don't think I'd be particularly good at it, really, but I'm more interested in approaching the topic through a more, I guess, intellectual, educative capacity, I guess, given my background. And, I'm happy to do my bit for the cause via those channels, whether it's hopefully writing articles in the future on the topic, or talking to people such as yourselves, sharing any interesting, important content. I'm more than happy to do that.
Awesome.
I certainly, this is like all new to me as well. So I have a lot to learn myself. And it's just fantastic, coming across you guys, you're all doing wonderful work. And if we can all get, some of this other information and stuff out there, more out into the mainstream, so people can have a better sort of more well-rounded, educated view on, things. Yeah, all the better. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot for sharing anything, because your education history, like, is important part of, I think, way better, getting the word out than standing on a street corner. But that's
Well, no, I
everyone's
mean
got their own
every
flavor,
method is just as important. Obviously protests and people getting out there like yourself, holding up signs and whatever. Every single method, whatever it is, has the same level of importance because it's just part of the just another piece of the puzzle. Forgive me, I can't think of a good analogy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it all
Yeah.
counts. It all counts. We just some of us just approach things from different ways. That's all.
Mhm.
Yeah. But anyway, I probably have to go in a couple of minutes. However, before I go, if that's all right, I wouldn't mind sharing my first paragraph of my hopefully book in the making. That's all right.
Oh, please
Um,
do.
I
Yeah, that'd be great.
haven't chosen a title yet. This is something I've been working on for at least 14 months. I've written over 100,000 words so far, and I've got more to go. But yeah, so like I mentioned earlier on the podcast, it's basically a story about my mental health journey with an emphasis on the harms of diagnosis. And so the first chapter starts off with kind of like a little mini poem, and it's not very long, but it's I just want to give you like a little bit of a taster, I guess.
No, please do. Thank you.
Yeah, so here it is. Okay. Chapter 1. I am dark and I am light. I am day and I am night. I am up and I am down. I am the wearer of the crown. It has come to my realization that I am nothing but a product of a bad decision made by someone to whom I have no connection with. I should never have existed, yet here I am, combing through my personal history, trying to make sense of this conundrum that is my reality. Having come from a problematic parentage, there was doom in the womb from the get-go, as fate had already decided that I wasn't going to be in for an easy ride. Yes, so they're my first opening sentences. And
I love it. That's great.
Yeah, I love it too. It's awesome. It's like got a rhythm to it. It's almost musical.
Oh, really? Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I'm just, trying to get a little bit of feedback, I suppose. But I basically wanted to start off with a really powerful opening.
It is.
So,
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, maybe I might have some hope then in getting it published. But look, even if I don't, it's been a real form of therapy for me in itself,
Oh, nice.
the actual process of writing it. I will go as far as saying, it's one of the reasons why I'm still here, so yeah. But I really hope that I can see it through to the end. Like I said, I'm not going to worry too much if it doesn't get published. It'd be absolutely awesome if it does. But I'm hoping, alongside all the other things that I'm doing, I'm hoping to have it done by at the very latest mid next year. Hopefully a lot earlier, but like I said, I've got a lot of plates spinning at the moment. But we'll just see what happens.
That's awesome. Great job. I really hope you pull it off. And I know how it's like a labor of love, and it's like something that does give you that sort of purpose feeling, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It means a lot.
Yeah, it's like you were forced into existence like all the rest of us, but it doesn't mean we have to stay quiet. Stay quiet about it. We can fight it.
Totally.
Bring others to the realization that existing isn't the greatest thing in the world, like so many people believe it is.
Yeah, totally.
And not even to minimize your suffering or anybody's, but if we were all born into a world where we did have a universal euthanasia option, it really would make life more bearable. It would.
Yeah, I know.
It almost would make you want to fight harder, I think.
It will. Yeah, I really do agree. Yes, I do, Kevin. Yeah, but and I'd just like to say thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful experience. This is the first podcast I've been on, so
nice.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so much, and thank you for listening. I hope I haven't waffled on too much. I hope I haven't spoken too quickly, but I'm sorry, it's just I've got to be a bit mindful of the time, but I just wanted to get out as much content as I could whilst I could. So thank you so much for listening.
Oh, it was great. It was great. Thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, it was a joy to have you, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime. And
I'd love to be a guest again. Thank you so much.
We'll waffle on some more.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
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 You have been listening to the Right to No Longer Exist, a Right to Die podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed your time and found the information valuable. Please visit us at therightttonolongerexist.com to learn more about our organization and mission statement. You can also follow us on our social media platforms at The Right to No Longer Exist. There you will find links to our individual channels as well. If you would like to contact us, please email therightttonolongerexist@gmail.com. Thank you for your time, and let's remember that during the time that it took to listen to this podcast, dozens, if not hundreds of people endured a horrific death by suicide. Let's fight together for a world where this doesn't happen anymore. See you next time on the Right to No Longer Exist podcast.